It's one of the biggest journalistic gambles in recent memory. An anonymous New York Times op-ed from a, quote, senior administration official who claims there is a group resisting the president from the inside. 2 days on, the story is only getting bigger. But whether the Times made the right call is open for debate. Adam Riley has more.
Times op-ed editor Jim Dow says after he read the piece and confirmed the author's identity, the decision to publish was easy.
The piece was important enough and strong enough to justify granting anonymity. The clarity of the writing and the emotional impact.
The author calls Trump amoral and anti-democratic, says there were early whispers about removing him through the 25th Amendment, and describes a quiet resistance within trying to protect the country from the president. At first, Trump scoffed at the claims.
A gutless editorial. We're doing a great job.
Then he suggested the piece might be treason and demanded that the Times name the author. Naturally, the story blew up.
Now, Jake, this is stunning.
I use the word astonishing again and again, but that's where we are.
But not everyone thinks the Times made the right call. Times reporter Jodi Kantor says she and her colleagues are now in the awkward position of trying to ferret out a Times source. There's also skepticism about how important the anonymous insider really is.
Who qualifies as a senior administration official? Hundreds upon hundreds might fit that bill.
And then there's the question of effect. Trump critic David Frum says the Times just inflamed the paranoia of the president, making him more reckless and more dangerous. Meanwhile, Trump supporters can say, "I told you so."
Constantly, never-ending efforts to destroy President Trump.
Which makes you wonder if the Times has any regrets.
So just quickly, how would everybody have done? Would you, if you were the editorial page editor, would you have run it?
I would not have. I think it was irresistible, but I would not have run it without attribution.
I would have run it.
I would have run it.
I don't know. I'm on the fence, really.
I would have run it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was fascinated by the process, which is why I really like that podcast, The Daily. They said that there was an intermediary that approached them. Jim Dow then read. He said he was astonished by the quality of the writing. So they might have done a little polishing on that piece, but that came in written the way it was. And I thought, it was thoughtful enough, and obviously whoever wrote it had enough detailed information that it felt okay to me, and I would have done it.
I think in an ideal situation, you want to have a name attached to any story, and certainly something that is as explosive as this one. But because it has such great information, I think you have to go with it, as long as you know who that person is. And apparently, the Times they vetted it, they know that they have a real source there, and I feel that you have to go with it, especially during these times, and so much that's being said about what's going on internally at the White House. The one thing I will say in the piece where it talked about who is a senior administration official, that was one of those things that we often joked about, because there would be a low-level person from the White House staff, and they would say, "Well, attribute this to to me as a senior administration official," and so it is kind of murky as to how senior a senior really is.
I don't think I would have done it. I think that there are too many people in this country. It just plays into them being the New York Times is manipulating my information without attribution. I don't trust them. It's made up. I talked to somebody from Tennessee today who says, "I don't believe it. It's just not real." And I'm surprised that President Trump hasn't called it fake news before now.
I think he already has.
Has he? I haven't heard. I've been looking for him, because if any story could come out and he could label as fake news, one without attribution would be perfect and play into his playbook.
Well, what I find interesting about this is that, in fact, President Trump has not said that this isn't real, and in fact, he is ordering a Justice Department investigation to find out who actually wrote it, which leads me to believe that he thinks that the identity of this person is going to come out rather quickly. Otherwise, he would dismiss it as fiction. It lines up with a lot of things we already knew about the president, but to have this coming from regardless of the level, a senior administration official gives it that much more power. I think it would have been irresponsible not to publish it.
So I think you have an interesting situation, because a Woodward book had come out with something, and this followed right on the heels. And I find people are mixing up the two in conversation, by the way. And that's, first of all, that's not right. And so then, what makes me a tiny bit uncomfortable, because, we are human and we can make mistakes, is that I am resting the credibility of the Times on this. I am trusting And I do, for the most part, trust
Not
them.
everybody does, though.
I understand that. But that is where I fall down in saying, yes, they know who it is. Yes, they can figure out because they know who it is, whether or not it was worthy to be published. So it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I believe that to be the case. But we also know there's a couple times when the Times just messed up. Big time.
Okay, next question. If you're Dean Baquet, editor of the Times, I'm Maggie Haberman, I come to you and I say, I've got the name. I've got it solid. Would you let me print it? I know who wrote that article, and I want to put it in my story.
Well, that's a very difficult decision to put that editor, that top editor in. They have to be trying to say who it is. They have to report it. I think that they do, and I think
Dean Baquet must know, don't you think?
Of course, he has to know. Has to know. Said he knew. I would think that you have to allow your reporter to go with it. Yes.
Now, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned, do they have a second source that, since there is this group internally that is working to protect the rest of the country from the president, it would seem to me that
there's more than one.
So you would at least try to say, look, I believe what you're saying, but can you at least let's do that wink game with somebody else so that we feel better that it's not just a single source.
Well, Woodward probably knows who it is. He's probably somebody he spoke to.
Yes, and I would say that, because we know how the Times would work this carefully, they would go back and vet every single thing that this guy said to them to prove that he was in the space to be able to recount what really is the inner circle. Or it could be a woman. But this is the Trump presidency, so I'm saying it's a guy. But so knowing how they work, they would say, all right, this happened on this day, this happened on what, so I feel comfortable about that. And I don't know. Now what do you do? Did they say to the guy, because we're in different times, this is not Watergate in the garage, likely someone will, find out who you are, and then we cannot protect you? Like a Maggie Haberman, she's got, hey, we've been shocked by how much information they get out of that White House as it is, before this guy said anything.
To answer your question, Dean Baquet, if a reporter came to Dean Baquet and said, I've got the name, I would run with it, but it would be really important that this not come from anywhere inside the building. I mean, it's got to be reported from outside the building.
You just
what are you
never
going to
know.
give it to the Post?
Yeah. No, he needs a source from inside the building.
Oh, I see. Yes.
If it's a source from the Times editorial pages, you can't use it.
No. And I believe they said they wouldn't do that. That was a wall. Yeah. But listen, Schmidt and Haberman and what's the other person? They've got some excellent sources.
They do.
So